Welcome to Lyme Time. I'm Allie from the Tick Chicks. We are all more than Lyme disease and chronic illness, and together we stand with you to overcome and rise. I'll bring you closer to the experts in cutting-edge treatments and even a few unexpected ways of healing. I'll ask the questions you want answers to regarding Lyme disease and successful ways of getting you closer to 100%. We are in this together and will not be defined by Lyme. So today my guest is Georgia, who is the founder of WBH Nutrition Company and who is a certified holistic health coach specializing in autoimmune nutrition. Georgia sent her debilitating autoimmune disease symptoms into remission through the healing power of food and self-care. She passionately helps her clients get their life back and feel their best through her individualized holistic nutrition coaching. So welcome, Georgia.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. You're in the Denver area, correct?
I am. I'm born and raised in Denver and haven't seemed to leave, so.
It's a great place. I get there a few times a year and I just love it there. So let's just jump right in. Today we're going to be discussing all things nutrition and how the mind, body, soul connection all sort of goes together. But first, let's talk about your own personal journey and how you sort of, got to where you are right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks again for having me. So just kind of my personal journey of food and Lyme and nutrition. When I was in college, I started just getting really, really chronic and bad acid reflux. I had always been an athlete and a runner and was at the point where I had such debilitating joint pain that I wasn't able to exercise anymore. Was getting migraines to the point where I had to, just be in bed and in a dark room the rest of the day because I felt so sick. So kind of fast forward, I figured out that I had celiac disease, and for the first time, I was just really curious about what was in my food and, had to read ingredient labels and teach myself how to cook. And this was 2011. So gluten-free really wasn't what it is today, where especially in Denver, I can go to any restaurant and there's a gluten-free menu. But I was living in Texas and gluten-free. And so it really forced me to kind of figure it out on my own. And then it just turned into this love of nutrition and food. So I graduated college and I started teaching first grade, and then heard about my nutrition school where I got my nutrition degree as a certified holistic health coach. So I would teach first grade, and then I would come home and just, do all of my studies and schoolwork for my nutrition course. And, it was great because it didn't feel like school or any extra work because it was kind of what I was doing anyway. So then I, managed my symptoms with being celiac, being gluten-free. And then I moved back to Denver. And I was living in a basement that had some mold in it. I was also teaching at another school that was a super old building that I then, was led to believe also had mold. And kind of that fall of, when was this, 2014, I started just to have really weird symptoms where I was really struggling with my memory. I had a lot of concussions as a kid and as an athlete, so we were kind of wondering, maybe this is just a concussion thing. I was having really bad sensitivity to light and noise and just that general fatigue. And then on top of it, I was getting just tons and tons of swelling in my pinky joint, which was so odd because it was just one finger. I think as many people with Lyme have experienced, went to a million doctors, tried everything, to try to figure out what was going on, and no one could really figure it out. So that a few months later, I had broken my wrist and asked them to check out my pinky while I was there. And they thought it was some sort of fracture on this joint swelling. So I ended up wearing this, funny little cast on my pinky finger And then it wasn't until about a year later that I was finally diagnosed with Lyme and Bartonella and Babesia and some of the other underlying co-infection. So, there's a bit more to the story as well, but, basically it was years of not feeling well and misdiagnoses. And I fortunately had my nutrition degree, but I was also in that place once I got diagnosed with Lyme that I realized, I really can't be in a space to help other people when I don't feel well. So I took 2 years off of pursuing anything with my business to focus on myself and my health, and was able to fortunately go into remission with food and self-care and, Lyme literate doctors. And then that's what ultimately sparked me to launch my business and be able to help people in a lot shorter amount of time heal and get their life back with something that took me years to figure out.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so many things sound so familiar to me, and I know will sound familiar to a lot of people. And, it's confusing. It's confusing to get the diagnosis, especially when you have food sensitivities or celiac, and you go down that path and then it just doesn't get better, sort of, and then you keep hitting walls. So I'm glad you found your answers for sure. And, we want to talk a little bit today about just general nutrition tips and facts, because this is a huge piece of the puzzle, I think, in healing. And it's not something that comes easily for people to let certain things go. It has to do with their upbringing and also like sort of holding on to sickness just a little bit longer, because, who would have ever guessed that adjusting your diet could improve things so dramatically. It especially doesn't make sense to a lot of people when they have Lyme disease, because here they are with a bacteria, so they don't often, they're thinking, just medicine and sort of Western and all of that. And I know I can speak from experience. It's like, wait a minute, I know I'm sensitive to all these foods, but I don't know how adjusting my nutrition will actually help a bacteria in my body. So let's just talk about gut health first and foremost. What's the connection of a good gut and better overall health?
Yeah, for sure. That's a great question. And just to kind of touch on your first point, I mean, I think that's so valid, where so much of dealing with Lyme or other autoimmune issues, we're already in this place where we feel like we've had so much taken away. So I see it so often where it can just feel like, ugh, do I really have to do one more thing? Or we're so tired from dealing with this, where again, it can feel like one more thing. So something that I always try to remind my clients is just to switch that perspective a little bit, of if you do choose to go down this route of helping your Lyme with food, which it will help, of that it's coming from a place of healing. So instead of focusing on like, I can't have this, I can't have that, shifting that mindset to, okay, I'm going to do this for this amount of time to heal my body. So I just wanted to speak on that first. And then gut health is, something I think that's really thrown around a lot. And I'm glad it's becoming more mainstream, because it's so, so important. And even though Lyme is that bacteria, when our gut is in check and when our gut is healthy, our body is then in a place to fight off the infection. So if you're feeling hesitant to change your diet, I think keep that in mind too, that when we can get our body into fighting shape, that's the biggest gift we can give ourselves to start healing. So your gut is basically just like a loose term for all of your digestive organs. So if you were to take it out of your body and stretch it out, it'd be about the size of a tennis court. And it's where about 70 to 90% of our immune system lies. So as you can imagine, once our gut is compromised, that's what causes inflammation in the body, because it creates these like literal holes in our body. So I like to think of it like a cheesecloth almost, where there should be some things that can kind of seep through and go into your bloodstream. But whether it's years of antibiotics, Lyme disease, environmental toxins, black mold, GMOs, someone with a leaky gut, which if you have Lyme, I would bet good money that you probably also have a leaky gut at some point. We have these literal holes in our body where then that inflammation goes through into our bloodstream, and then it causes that inflammation. And you can think of inflammation as just kind of like little fires in your body of where it's manifesting with symptoms. So maybe it's like joint pain, fatigue, light sensitivity, things like that. So the good news, even though it seems overwhelming, is I see all the time people who have all of these symptoms that seem like they're not related, of like, oh, my hormones are off, I'm not sleeping, I'm super bloated, I have stinging pain in my feet. And it feels like we have all these things that are random and not connected. But what I find is actually good news is that it's all just your gut, and it all just comes back to your gut. So if we can get our guts healthy and in place, then again, they're in that fighting shape to fight off Lyme and then any other of these inflammatory symptoms that you might be feeling.
Great. It's a big concept, but also something that I think is exciting for people who are out there suffering, because it's something you can do today immediately in your home, and you can actually monitor it and be in charge of that, at least the one aspect of healing. So getting more specific, are there specific things that those who are immunocompromised should stay away from as a rule of thumb, just some basics?
Yeah, absolutely. And, nutrition it's really different for everyone, and it's super individualized, which is why I love it. But I think some of these kind of staples are really important if you're, immunocompromised. So whether you're autoimmune, Lyme, trying to lose weight, trying to be healthier, I think the number one overarching principle is to just eat real food. If you can't pronounce an ingredient in something, it's best to avoid it. And then just, again, keeping it really simple. We make nutrition really complicated, but at the end of the day, it's all about just eating good quality green cruciferous vegetables, quality proteins, and then, some minimal fruits or whole grains, and then lots of good quality fats. If you're Lyme or autoimmune, I think on top of processed food, the biggest things to avoid would be gluten, sugar, and dairy. And then from there, we can kind of get even more specific to really, really heal and seal up your gut. But if you're someone that's never experimented with adjusting their diet, I would start with processed food and getting rid of that. Then I would cut out gluten, which is the sticky compound in wheat, barley, and rye. And then once you cut gluten, I think you'd have a lot easier time cutting sugar too, because your body's kind of processing it the same. And then dairy, because again, those are just those big inflammatories that's going to create symptoms and a reaction within your body.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Great place to start, at least for some people. What about things like caffeine and alcohol?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I get this question a lot, and there's that emotional attachment to food, and then specifically, our coffee and our glass of wine. Again, I think it really depends. I find with both caffeine and alcohol, at some point in your wellness journey with this, your body just needs a break. So I would say if you have never taken a break from caffeine and coffee and alcohol, it's a good idea to do so. I think too, if it feels really hard to give those things up, I would just try to keep in mind, like, this is something I'm doing for a short amount of time for long-term results. So like how that looked like in my life was, I didn't drink alcohol or coffee for 3 months, like very cold turkey. And then now that I'm in a place where my gut is healed and sealed, I'm able to tolerate things like that. I also have some clients who maybe aren't super, super sick, and they can handle 1 cup of coffee in the morning because emotionally it's just too damaging to give that up, which I understand. So again, I think it's a bit of this balancing act. Like if you're someone that's super sick and you really don't feel well, by having a ton of caffeine and coffee and alcohol, it's kind of just like taking a few steps back, and your body's already exhausted. So I would definitely recommend at some point taking a break. If you've taken that good break, then finding that place where you can get a little bit of balance back in your life. So maybe that's Like for me, it looks like I only drink decaf because I know that caffeine really affects my energy levels. Or if I drink, I'm going to have a really good quality wine or a really good quality tequila and not do it every day. So again, I think give yourself a break. Know that it's a couple steps back if you're on this process, but it can eventually lead you to that place where then you can just have balance with it too. So I think it's like a short-term sacrifice for a long-term gain.
I've heard the same thing. And, you know, at one point I was so sensitive to everything, but one doctor said, listen, if it's a special occasion and you wanted to, you know, want to have a glass of something, what he recommended for me was just either vodka or tequila. Somehow they break down a little more clean in your body. And that was kind of basically it. He said no beer or wine for a while because they're just too reactive with, I guess the grains in beer. And yeah. I have no idea, maybe the tannins, or I don't know about wine, maybe the sugar level probably.
Yeah, that's too.
Yeah. So that really helped me a lot, was just cleaning up even that and cleaning up my caffeine intake as well. Talking a little bit about chronic fatigue, and I've heard this along the way that eggs can have a negative effect. Can you talk a little bit about the use of eggs in our diet?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it can really depend on the person. Like one person's food can be another person's poison. So a lot of the times the reason that a doctor or, you know, some sort of practitioner might want you to eliminate eggs is they're just one of the top 6 allergens, and that they can be something that we really react to. So I think, again, kind of similar to what I was saying with like coffee and alcohol, like it's something to experiment with of, does this work for my body? Does it not? I think if you find that it does work with your body, they can be a really fabulous, complete protein, and have tons of nutrients and health benefits. But I think it's definitely worth toying with, or maybe even taking a food sensitivity test with, to see, can I tolerate this? Because a lot of those foods there's a lot of foods in the autoimmune nutrition category that aren't necessarily unhealthy foods, but they can just cause reactions, or if you're extra sensitive, they can make you feel ill. But for someone with a healthy gut and a healthy system, they might be fine. So a lot of that's just kind of figuring out what works for you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, got it. And then 2 other things that I get asked about a lot would be tomatoes and like nightshades, like eggplant.
Yeah, definitely.
About that.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, again, like eliminating nightshades at some point in time is really, really helpful. I think especially if you're someone that feels your Lyme or autoimmune symptoms in your joints, or if you're someone that has like gets red rashes sometimes, I think you should definitely experiment with nightshades. So like, again, for me and for my clients, how that looks is we'll eliminate it for a certain amount of time and then slowly start to kind of reintroduce them back. And then it's a matter of figuring out what works for you and what doesn't. So for me, my kind of rule of thumb is like, I don't buy any nightshades. But if I'm out to dinner, I know that I'm fine with tomato, but I know bell peppers are something I don't touch. They just, for whatever reason, really hurt my fingers. So again, too, I think it's a matter of giving your body that clean slate and clean break to then experiment, okay, what bugs me and what doesn't. And what's so great is that once you've given your body that kind of clean slate, then it really tells you, here's what you can tolerate and here's what you can't tolerate. But that looks a little different for everyone.
Yeah, I noticed that on my own journey throughout the years. I sort of dip into different things, you know, and right now I'm sort of in a rule of thumb, no grains. Same thing, if I go out to dinner, I might have, because I'm in a healthy spot right now, that I can dip into that. But I don't, as a rule of thumb, I really don't eat a ton of grains anymore. I just found that was for whatever reason, a trigger, just the corn and wheat and flour and all that good stuff.
Totally.
Um,
I know, and I
but
think
it
that,
can be done, something I wanted to just point out is on your Instagram page, you have a ton of delicious and recipes and tips on foods that, our listeners might really want to check out, because sometimes when you start out on this journey of cutting everything out besides, fruit and vegetables essentially, and maybe a little bit of clean protein, it's a different way of life for some people. I was born and raised in the Midwest. You were in Texas. It's just not. It's coming. It's developing right now into more a different way of approaching food, but it does take a little bit of a shift mentally. If somebody is going through extreme fatigue right now, is there anything nutritionally that they can add or subtract into helping them with chronic fatigue, or that extreme fatigue where you can't get out of bed?
yeah, that's a great question. I think there's a lot of things there. I also, just to kind of a little go back on your point with grains, I think that's a huge nutrition difference, is to not just be gluten-free, but grain-free. So I think whether it's like fatigue or joint pain or anything, if you feel like, I've already kind of tried this diet thing and it's not working, if you haven't gone grain-free, I find that can be such a game changer to really kind of get you over the hump. So I would say, in terms of fatigue, if you aren't grain-free or gluten-free already, definitely try that, especially grain-free. It sounds counterintuitive, but giving up caffeine can really, really help your energy levels. And then drinking a lot of water. And then I would also say, just lifestyle-wise, understand too that whether you're autoimmune or Lyme, like, your body is fighting on behalf of you. And so as a result, it's tired and it's exhausted. So I would just say too, don't be afraid or feel like you're being lazy if you take a nap or let yourself rest. Really, with fatigue, unfortunately, it's just, we need rest and we need more sleep than the average person. And we have to be really careful with not doing too much. I think that's the biggest gift of Lyme and autoimmunity, is that it's just this invitation to slow down. So I would say, eat that healthy plant foods forward, quality proteins forward, but also too, give yourself grace, give yourself rest, lots of water, lots of good fat, and know that once your body gets the rest it needs, in time, your energy levels will get back to normal.
Can you give us one substitute for a sleep aid and one substitute for a cup of coffee?
Yeah, that's a great question. So for sleep, I love magnesium, like 2 magnesium supplements before bed. It's really, really great for sleep. Also good for your digestion, anxiety. So you can just take those orally. You can also take magnesium. They have some of those fizzy magnesium drinks, like a Calm, or there's some other brands too, but that can be really nice to help you ease into sleep. I would also recommend turning out your overhead lights an hour before you want to go to bed, and that can help your melatonin levels just kind of go down ahead of time, so you're not laying there sleeping. So magnesium would be my number one, just 2 at night. And then in terms of coffee, as a supplement, as a replacement, there's an herbal coffee company out of Boulder that you can order, I think just on Amazon. It's called Rasa, I think, Rasa. And they have a great herbal coffee supplement that I would always just make in my French press, and then you can put in like a little, coconut milk or something like that, and it kind of feels like a dark enough tea as coffee. If you do have other herbal coffee brands, I would just say be really careful to check that it's gluten-free. Some of them have barley in them, so just double check, but that brand that I mentioned is all gluten-free.
That's awesome. Okay. And then what are your thoughts on a modified fast, or a fasting during the time of acute pain and fatigue?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, again, I think it depends on the person. I think there can be some really, really great benefits to fasting, especially for weight loss. When I was battling Lyme, there was times I would do intermittent fast just to give my body that chance to reset. However, I think above all else, like, you know your body better than I do, better than your doctor does, better than your acupuncturist does. So I think above all else, listen to your body. Like, if you're trying a fast because you read it somewhere and you feel terrible, then you don't have to do that. So I think, again, that's a huge part with our wellness journeys, is just being your own advocate and listening to yourself. So kind of, multifaceted answer. It can be really great, but also don't put yourself in a position where you don't feel well, because that's not worth it.
Yeah, sometimes I'll do an intermittent fast, not for any other reason, but I'm reacting to everything else. And
Yeah.
it's like, instead of just having a salad with dressing and, like you said, peppers and things that I would normally be eating, I'll just, drink some bone broth or do something like water with lemon. I'm not saying skip every meal in the day. I'm just saying, just what you said, give your body a break. And that's something that I know that I'm not going to react to. And if I can do it for a few days and just kind of be on a very, very easy, non-reactive diet, it can help me make the turn. So what would be a typical day's worth of meals for somebody in chronic pain?
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to follow, for myself and clients, just take a mix of a lot of different dietary theories, but basically eating a sort of modified paleo diet of, no gluten, no grains or dairy, and then just a lot of like good quality vegetables and proteins and fat. So what that could look like in the morning, it could be like 2 eggs and a small serving of berries with some nut butter, like an almond butter. Or you could do a green smoothie with, a substitute milk, mostly vegetables, not a ton of fruit, and then a quality, grain-free, dairy-free protein powder. In terms of lunches and dinner, I like to just tell and encourage my clients to just think of it of like veggie protein as just kind of the simplest way to do it. So like a side of Brussels with a yummy side salad, and then like fresh caught salmon. So it's just like veggie protein, and then adding in some of that good fat. So like you could throw in some avocado into your salad if you need more carbs, a Japanese sweet potato. And when you look at my meal plans, they look really, really simple, which they are. But I find that when you eat that way, you're just not really craving or needing anything else, and you're pretty satisfied because you're getting the nutrients you need. Now that it's getting a little bit colder here in Denver, I'm loving just like good root vegetable soups that are in season. So like last night I made like a pumpkin and butternut squash soup with a side salad. So again, just super, super simple. And then all the recipes on my website are all grain, gluten, and dairy free. And I try to make them pretty accessible with not too many crazy ingredients.
Yeah, that's great. I'm loving your recipes right now. What would you say to someone who has tried the paleo route and the clean eating route and has really, really tried and just keeps hitting the wall? Are there any tips that you could give, or is there advice, or, how would you really direct somebody in just trying to keep on that path?
Yeah, for sure. And it's definitely hard. I mean, I have definitely, when I was sick, had times where I was in a Whole Foods crying, like, I don't know what I can eat. This is exhausting. But I think kind of the big thing is kind of what I was saying earlier, of just trying to switch your mindset of focusing on what you can eat instead of what you can't have, switching your mindset that you're healing your body, you're not on a diet. I think that can be really helpful. Also, to maybe breaking it into shorter amounts of time. So instead of just being like, I'm on this diet until the end of time, just being like, okay, I'm going to really, really stick to this for 3 weeks and then reevaluate. So maybe bringing it into smaller chunks can be helpful. And then on the sense of if you're someone that's tried the diet, but, or that way of eating, but you still aren't really getting some results, when it comes to gut health, I like to think of it in like 3 R's. Like we remove the unhealthy foods, we repair, and we restore. So sometimes what happens is people remove, but they're not repairing. So I would say too is maybe try to do some things to help you repair. So like daily bone broth could be a really great one to help you get that repair, where you're not eating foods that are damaging your gut, but you're also not doing anything to help heal and seal it up. So I would recommend adding in some bone broth if you're like, okay, I'm doing the food, but nothing's really changing.
So you can actually repair those damaging holes that are what are called leaky gut. You can actually reverse that.
Yeah, definitely. So you're reversing and repairing that by removing those foods, and then repairing. I find that bone broth is the best way to really heal and seal it up. And that's what's so cool with my clients of, I have people that can't keep anything down. They're so sick, or people that are just so irregular, crazy joint pain, or rapidly losing weight. And we do the removal and the repair with the broth. And I find that broth really, really makes a difference to seal up their gut lining.
What about pH and a pH or alkaline sensitivities in diet? I mean, how serious do you think we should be taking that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, that's a matter of listening to your body too. But when you're eating that way of having all of those good quality greens and staying hydrated, then you don't need to worry about your pH balance as much.
Yeah. I've noticed a little bit that sometimes if I start out with a little cup of, I mean, literally, this is how much coffee I can tolerate. It's such a joke, but if I start out that way, somehow I just don't feel as good as if I start out my day with just a glass of water with lemon, just to set the tone, my intentions, and I feel like I'm doing something a little bit, because coffee can be so acidic.
Absolutely. Yeah, I definitely recommend that if you are drinking coffee, to definitely start with a water, or lemon water is even better, to just, help flush your system and stay hydrated.
In terms of everyday supplements, should people be taking probiotics or chlorella, like binders? How do you feel about probiotics and binders?
So I think if you're someone that is really sick and really not feeling well, sometimes probiotics can be like too much bacteria in our guts. And it can be just kind of too much going on. So I would almost say that if you start kind of like a gut protocol, to wait on probiotics for a couple weeks until things settle, because I think it can just be too much going on. Mm-hmm. And I would also throw fermented food into that category too. Like if you're someone that can't keep things down and just everything feels out of whack, then I would take a break from probiotics for a couple weeks until you've like really followed the protocol. And then in terms of a binder, I think it's something to talk to your, healthcare provider about. For me, I found a huge, huge difference from taking activated charcoal every day with black mold exposure. That was something that really got me over the hump. But those can also counteract some medications. So when it comes to supplements and binders and things like that, I would definitely recommend just checking in with your provider first.
Yeah, and I think it's a great point that you're making, that this is actually I call it a multi-angled attack, on your bad health. And we really always have to weigh in with physicians and nutritionists and acupuncturists and herbalists and everything, and just make sure that we're not causing more damage to our bodies with something as basic as a probiotic. I had no idea that it could sort of not be great if you're in an acute state. So tell us a little bit about your ebooks and programs and classes and things that you offer that somebody not in your state or not close to you could participate in.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess, a blessing of all of the craziness of the world is most of my coaching is virtual. So I actually work with clients all around the US, which is great. So yeah, I work one-on-one with my clients. I specialize in autoimmunity and Lyme, but also, have helped people lose weight, people with hormonal issues, people gain weight. I like to say that I work with people that just don't really feel well. And so through food and some lifestyle tips, I help people feel well with that individualized coaching. So work one-on-one with people in 45 to hour-minute sessions and check in, either every week or every other week and give them customized meal plans and recipes and again, just those self-care and lifestyle tips because it's not just about the food. It's that whole, why I started my business, that whole body healing that it's all about. And then for people that maybe aren't quite ready for private coaching, I have 2 online courses on my website that I offer. So I have a course that's just autoimmune nutrition, and a lot of that's what I give my private clients. And then I have an Enneagram and nutrition course where I take the Enneagram personality test with a colleague, and we just discuss how your personality type impacts your relationship with food and nutrition. And then on my website, I have tons of paleo, gluten, grain, dairy-free recipes. And then I have some ebooks and meal plans that are available for download as well. So lots of resources on my website. I also do free 20-minute calls. If you're just interested in learning how I work with people, you can also book some of those on my website too if you're curious to learn more. And I love helping people get their life back, and I find it's nice for people to sit with someone who knows how it feels, because it definitely can get lonely and overwhelming.
Absolutely. I want to just ask you, I have to ask you because I've seen this on your Instagram page, the Enneagrams. What's up with that? Tell us a little bit about that, because I'm super interested in how your personality could actually be a critical part in your health journey.
Yeah, it's so much fun. So if you're unfamiliar with it, the Enneagram is just a dynamic personality test. You can take a test online. I would definitely recommend the WEPS test, WEPSS, I think it is. It's like $10, but anyway, there's 9 different Enneagram personality types, and you take the test and you find yours. And I know a lot of us, if you're someone that's listening to a podcast like this, like you've probably taken a bunch of these. But I really love this one because it's not about getting stuck in your personality. It's about, okay, these are my strengths, these are my tendencies, but how can I evolve to be more whole and more like these other types too? So it's not just like, okay, I'm a number 2, so I can behave like this because this is just what my personality does. It's really about evolving and noticing our strengths and weaknesses. So yeah, one of my colleagues who she's linked on my website, she does Enneagram coaching. And so then we realized just, again, so much of nutrition is beyond the food. So we have this online course, and then also do, when we can, workshops in person of your relationship with food. So like, for example, with the personality type 2, it's the personality that's like always giving to other people. So nutritionally, it might be something like, instead of cooking all of your friends a decadent dinner, cook yourself a decadent dinner. Or for a personality type 8, that's very high intensity, a nutrition tip might be like, let's maybe cut out caffeine and try replacing it with some herbal teas. So it's kind of things like that where we just take those, strengths and weaknesses of each personality and then tie in the food and all of that. And it's a ton of fun. So especially with a lot of us being home so much, if you need like a good book or an activity, dive into the Enneagram. It's a lot of fun.
It looks like you two have such a good time with it. And yeah, definitely want to check that out. And then just kind of going back to your virtual sessions with clients, do they send you their blood work? Do you work off that? Or do you just, how does that work with regard to, where they are currently in their journey.
Yeah.
Or maybe not. Maybe they don't send anything in.
Yeah. So, I mean, if they have blood work or food sensitivity testing or things like that, those are things I'm comfortable interpreting and using. But yeah, we just kind of go off of what that person's feeling. So my first session with people is always an hour, sometimes more, of just a really deep dive into their health history, of, what they're eating, how they're feeling. And usually from that first hour together, I can tell, okay, here's what we need to shift. Here's what we need to do more or less of. But yeah, I mean, especially for my Denver clients, like I have a lot of, fortunately, people in the wellness world that I can partner with and refer to. And then even people outside of Colorado, I'm still in touch with their whole wellness team, because it takes a village with all of this. So
it really does. You have been such a wealth of information for all of us today. I just want to let everybody know once again where they can find you. If you're on Instagram, you can go to @WholeBodyHealing, and you'll see Georgia right there pop up for you. And then her website is wbhnutritionco.com. wbhnutritionco.com. Any final words for our listeners out there that are suffering actually right now and feeling a little hopeless?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's been such a pleasure. And second of all, just if you're in that feeling of overwhelmed and hopeless, I think the biggest thing is just not to give up hope and know that there will be a day where you are better. I get that there are times, maybe right now, where that feels impossible and that this might not ever go away and there might not ever be answers. But just to hold on to that glimmer of hope that you can get better, because healing is possible. So
thank you so much, Georgia. You're
thank
such an
you.
inspiration. I appreciate your time so much. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.